We are days away from Gregg with 2G's Berhalter's announcement of his roster for November's World Cup qualifiers against Mexico and Jamaica, and we need to talk about it. The Qué Golazo USMNT Hour begins right now. What is going on, everyone? We are back. Heath Pearce, Jimmy Conrad, and the U.S. men's national team is a big deal, and we've decided to have a dedicated weekly discussion about the stars and stripes with you, the audience. So make sure you join us on the Qué Golazo YouTube channel every Monday for your weekly fix of USA. Jimmy, by the way, before we get into it more, and we got some things for you guys. We're going to have some calls to action. We want to make sure you guys get engaged in the show and are a part of this all along the way. But Jimmy, are you a big fan of the USA chant?
The basic USA chant?
Just USA.
So I had gotten a lot of grief, Heath Pearce and everybody listening and watching, about this chant, how boring it is. Like, oh, it's just the USA, you know? And then I went to Portugal. I saw them play, against Samuel Eto'o in Cameroon in a friendly. And I'm in the stands, true story. And all of a sudden, the stands, everybody's like, Portugal. And I got up. I was like, are you serious? Like, you're giving us crap and you're doing the same exact thing. Just because we use letters and they're saying, 3 letters combined or whatever. I just thought I was blasphemy at that point. I was hot. I'm still hot about it 8 years later.
All right. Well, I need to know from everybody that are in the comments and waiting, and apologies if you guys came earlier. We had the timing mixed up on the show, but we're glad you're here now. So let us know what your thoughts are on that USA chance. And if you're watching this on YouTube live, by the way, I can't emphasize this enough. Smash that like button, slap it like an old dad does with like an old pickup truck. Just slap that thing on the side and get those notifications from us. You get the picture, Jimmy. You know when they slap this whole thing and slap up on the side of a car. But yeah, hit that subscribe button and make sure you're commenting along the show. It helps the algorithm, helps more people join in on the show. And obviously we want to include everything that you guys are saying.
Jackie's got a great comment. She says it should be USA. USA.
What is
USA? I'm here for it. Can I bring my megaphone, Jackie? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Isn't there also is it the what's the women's national team chant that they have?
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something Wu-Tang Clan. I was like, all right, I'm kind of curious about this.
I think it's I'll figure it out along the way. But they have one like kind of code that they speak. But Jimmy, let's talk about the most informed players for the U.S. men's national team right now. And everyone that's watching this or listening to this, however you're taking in this content live right now, if you're hiding this from your boss, give us your take on who you think the most informed players are. And I don't want the lazy takes. I don't want informed being the best players that we have because we know the talent pool that we have. Jimmy, I want from you and I want from everyone in the comment section to throw in who the most informed players are. An example, Joe Scally. Jimmy, we know that gets us heated, knowing that even now he might not be called up, considering he was already informed before the last camp. Are there a few players that are informed to you? Is Weston McKennie in top form? Gianluca Busio, he played next to Tanner Tessman over the weekend, by the way. The first time 2 Americans have featured in a Serie A match together ever in our history. Pretty amazing. Talk to me about informed players.
Okay, everybody, listen. Look at this behind me. It says Scally in. And I say that because he's never been called into the full team. He has some representation with our youth national teams. He got purchased by Borussia Mönchengladbach from NYCFC for $2 million. Okay, and that's a pretty steep price for a youth player, in my humble opinion. So clearly there was some hype around.
How much did Giorena go for, by the way? Do you know?
I don't
somewhere
know.
Around that. I think it must have been somewhere around that from NYCFC also.
I assume that, but Reyna comes in with a little bit of hype, given that his dad played. So I think it's a little. Maybe not like for like, but I would say that Joe Scally, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that he got purchased for $2 million. And what I like about his game is that he can help us on both sides. He can be on the left side and be the wing back or left fullback or on the right. And this past weekend, he dropped an absolute peach of an assist to Briel Embolo for Borussia Mönchengladbach against Bochum. And what I think is important is that he has played in all 10 games and started all 10 games for Mönchengladbach in the Bundesliga. There's only 2 other players on Mönchengladbach that have done that. Jan Sommer, the goalkeeper, not a big surprise, right? You go with the goalkeeper, plus a very good one, the Switzerland international, and then their captain, Lars Stindl. And that's it. And Joe Scally.
I think he's the most.
He's 18, dude.
I think he's got the most minutes of any American in the new seasons in the top 5 leagues. I think he's at the top of the list in terms of minutes played of all Americans right now, which is just again, you go back a month and obviously you cut that in half, but he was still performing and playing regularly in the same way that we saw Matthew Hoppe burst onto the scene. He's one that I think you have to call in. Obviously, it's different because he's got a goal and assist in the Bundesliga now. As a fullback, he's played both sides as a fullback. He's been in a wing back where I think he had his goal when he was in a wing back position in a back three and he was higher up the field or more advanced up the field. But he's got a lot of tools, and I don't know what his best position is. He's a right-footed player that can play on the left side. But just the fact that he's playing in the Bundesliga at 18 years old at a club that is considered a historic club, or what they call a traditional club in Germany, where there's a lot of pressure. He's one that you need to be selected. And then on top of that, if you're talking about form, right? And we're going into this, let's avoid form for a minute. I'm not team form, like cohesion of the team. Is there any other players beyond Joe Scally that you're like in peak form right now? We've got to find a place for them on the field, because some of the ones that we talked about before, Conrad's in and out of the team. You've got, Matthew Hoppe's in and out of his team. Weston McKennie is doing well when he plays. Tyler Adams in and out of the team has only played half of their matches. We're kind of in a weird place right now going into these next camps where, you might have to call on a few players like a Joe Scally that are in form and playing regularly.
Yeah, if we're going in form, then I think we have to consider just Serginho Dest as a winger, frankly, because that's where he's playing for Barcelona, and he hasn't done poorly. Yes, I know he missed a sitter in El Clasico, but that's an interesting one for me that he's playing higher up the field. So you could potentially
left winger or right winger for you, Jimmy?
No, right wing. You put Joe Scally.
Okay, see ya, Brendan Aaronson. Well, go have a seat then, man. Our other most informed player in the national.
No, Brendan Aaronson's in the team, dude. You have Dest on one side and Aaronson on the other, and Ricardo Pepi potentially. I don't know if we want to get into starting lineups, but that's where I would start to take this. I do think that Weston McKennie has scored in back-to-back games, as somebody rightfully commented. I like that Allegri trusts him, not always to start, but at least to come on and be an influential player. And he seems to be making the most of his minutes right now. But you could, and as YouTube user says, you could 100% put Dest higher up the field, and he is dangerous. And I think he likes starting in a higher position up the field and allow Scally to maybe fall back into that. Here's my issue though. Joe Scally, this is an interesting time for Gregg Berhalter, who addressed the Joe Scally situation before, said he called him after the roster got announced to say, hey, listen, you're on our radar, but this isn't the time. You don't have that experience. How the hell else is he going to get the experience if you don't call him in? And we thought, both of us thought it would have been smart to bring him in, even if you didn't want to play him, just to get him around the group.
You're bringing in everybody. They're bringing in everybody. We got direct flight from all over the world coming in.
Dude, don't even get me going on that. And we don't bring in Joe Scally. It's pretty scandalous in some ways. And then this time around, we play against Mexico. So he can easily say to Joe Scally, listen, it's Mexico. I've got guys that played against him in the Nations League final and the Gold Cup final. I got my group that know how to get the business done against Mexico. And Joe Scally can't say anything. And then
you can't give him scrap minutes against Jamaica away. That's really hard, man.
No,
that's a really hard game to come in.
It's a really hard game, and it's only 2 games in this window. And that changes who I think you bring in, because you could pretty much have the same. You could potentially go with the same starting 11 for both games.
Yeah.
And that just makes me worried, because Joe Scally should be in the team. So let's say that he doesn't. I mean, I don't expect him to start, but I think at this point, it's become undeniable that you have to bring him into the team, because if you start to look at our wing backs on both sides, you have Anthony Robinson, also known as Jedi, playing a lot of minutes and being very influential and just getting better and better at Fulham. Okay. He's our automatic starter in my humble opinion, on the left side. And then on the right side, I think it's Dest until proven otherwise. But if you had Scally that could do either side like Dest can, and you have Yedlin, all of a sudden our outside back position gets a little bit more solidified. But Scally's got to get those minutes to prove not only to us, but to the team that he can be the guy.
Yeah, and I think it's tough to think that you could throw him in against Mexico necessarily, but the only way is to throw him in against Mexico. And again, we talked about Dest, like Dest being the first ever 60-minute fullback that we could have, even if he was as a fullback. What are the chances that you could then throw in a Joe Scally to close out the 30 minutes? That's not a bad situation. We know it's hard when you step into an international game to find the rhythm. It's almost tougher than actually playing the game. But
his first ever game for Borussia Mönchengladbach was against Bayern Munich, and he more than held his own. And he's only 18. I mean, this guy just has a lot of maturity about him, and he has the confidence that he thinks he can play with anybody. And we had him on CBS Sports HQ earlier today, and he talked about going up against Leroy Sané, who he had a poster of Leroy Sané on his wall or something. He had a photo with him when he came over to train with NYCFC, or when they came over to do a tour of Manchester City. I mean, he loved Leroy Sané, and the fact that he was then playing against them for Mönchengladbach against Bayern blew his mind. But he held his own and did the job against Leroy Sané. Yeah. So all I'm saying is that I don't think it's going to be that overwhelming. I don't start him against Mexico, but Gregg Berhalter has done some crazy things, like starting George Bello, another 18-year-old, at left back against Mexico in the Gold Cup final when Bello hadn't played that whole tournament. So Gregg doesn't have it in his bag to try some crazy shit sometimes. And I don't think Joe Scally would be that big of a risk that he couldn't hold his own in that game. That said, this really comes down to formation, Heath. Are we playing a back three? Are we playing a back four? What are we deciding to go with against Mexico? Are we trying to basically mirror their lineup in some capacity? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the U.S. is best with a back four. Again, you then have to find that balance, and I think we started to see that with Robinson and Dest. But Joe Scally is a good shout. And I actually, similarly, my journey to Germany was my first game against Bayern Munich as well. The difference was I was 23. And there was a lot of times I was out of my depth at that point, being like, I'm 23. There's certain things about these games that I'm playing in that I've never experienced before. He's getting that at 18 now. And he's proving to that team at 18 years old. I remember anytime there was 18-year-olds around our team, very few of them, Jimmy, were getting a sniff, you know? And if they did, they had to be really, really good. And they had to show a maturity beyond their years, not just like, you don't put it, especially as a defender, you don't throw a defender on at 18 and be like, oh, we'll figure it out. Because if it's going to cost you games, you're like, get back on the bench. We'll get you your game somewhere else. Train with the first team, you'll get better. And so there's just this trajectory that he's on. And again, I'm not saying he's going to be a world-class player by any means, but he's playing regularly for Borussia Mönchengladbach. He has to be brought in. So, Jimmy, before we get to your roster wish list, for a player like that, coming into a camp that's only 2 games, you know what it's like. There's only that sort of 1 or 2 days that you're actually training. Is it just about, in your eyes, of having him in, having him around, or is it legitimately to see where you can slot him into a match? Because they are qualifiers. And let's not forget, you lose to Mexico and things get really real again, depending on the results. Things start to get really stressful. We are going to be, at least for these next 4 games, in this constant state of high pressure situations where we're teetering on chaos if things don't go our way.
What I'll say very quickly is that with regard to Mexico, they're our biggest rivals, our biggest challengers to be top of the table. And that's proving, right? Mexico's on top right now with 14 points. We're second with 11. Canada is in third on 10. I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. If we qualify or don't qualify for the World Cup, it's not going to be based on our results against Mexico. It's going to be whether we drop points against Panama or whether we lose, have a draw against Canada, or against Canada when we have a lead, or Honduras or Jamaica. Like, that's where we're going to make or break whether we qualify for the World Cup. It's not against the games against Mexico. You kind of go into qualifying knowing you're probably going to drop points to these guys in some capacity. So it's the minnows of CONCACAF that I think we have to be concerned with. That said, this is a great opportunity for us to either catch them even up with points, or if they win this and beat us, they've got a 6-point gap at the top of the table. Not to say that that's insurmountable for us, because we'll get another crack at them, but at that point, we're probably playing for second. What scares me about Mexico very quickly, and I know we're going to have a proper preview for this, is that they still haven't played their best yet. Now, with regard to Joe Scally, you and I both had the experience with the national team where when Bruce thought I was ready, Bruce Arena was my coach when I first got into the team. He took me down to Trinidad and Tobago for a World Cup qualifier, not the World Cup qualifier where we didn't qualify, because that would be awesome. Well, to still be competing at that age. But I will say that when I went, he took 23 players and he knew I wasn't going to start. Didn't matter how I was training. He knew that I needed a little bit of a buffer to really appreciate what this is all about. So now I'm in the locker room and I am just taking it all in, Heath. I'm taking in I still look up to Eddie Pope. And I was watching what he was doing just to prep for a game. You're in this little tiny locker room. You feel like you're in the way because you're one of the extra guys. You're not even in the 18. And I'm watching Eddie Pope, no joke, drink pickle juice. And I was like, I've never thought about drinking pickle juice before. And it helps hydrate and whatever, all that little stuff that I never knew. But this is this guy trying to gain every advantage that he can to make sure that he performs at the highest level. And these little insights that you wouldn't get if you watch on TV or whatever it is. So to be there, to see how the guys are training, to see what it looks like, even in warm-up, what they're doing right before the game, what Bruce is telling the team, what the expectations are, what's the captain saying. These are all little things. And then you get to see it play out. And then you get to be in that locker room at halftime and after the game to really kind of connect all those dots that you can't replicate by not bringing them in. So I think Joe Scally has to be brought in. I think you've got to continue to bring in the Chris Richards of the world, even though he's kind of in and out of the Hoffenheim lineup right now, and you bring in these guys that maybe are still on the precipice. Now, my only concern is, as I mentioned before, we only have 2 games in this window. We don't have to bring in as big of a group. And so this is going to be really, really important for Gregg to really identify which players he think can help him, not only in this window, but the windows moving forward, which is, I think, what you and I are talking about with Joe Scally.
Yeah, I agree. And anybody who's just tuning into this or has been watching the whole time, make sure you hit the like button and send your comments, questions. Let us know where you're watching this from. We want to get all your takes. We want to throw them up on the screen. We want to continue to use those in the future as well. We want to keep this as a two-way dialogue. Jimmy and I don't want to talk at you. We want to talk with you. We want to have this be a conversation. So keep those comments coming, even if they're hot takes or something you want to say. Here's one right here. For as deep as we are, I'm concerned with our depth behind Tyler Adams. Acosta is way too inconsistent. In the qualifiers, he just hasn't looked like he did in the Gold Cup. And by the way, everyone, just so you know, Jimmy and I are going to be going full-blown previews all the way through this next round of qualifiers coming up today. We're just kicking off our Monday weekly episode. We're going to be doing these every Monday as well, talking about the U.S. men's national team updates on everyone, where they're at, where the players' forms. We're going to talk about our roster wish list, and we're going to go on a journey of the CONCACAF power rankings top 10 as well while we're having this episode today, Jimmy. So real quick on that, to answer that question, to give my answer, Jimmy, I'm worried about depth in general because we've seen now we've got so many young guys that it just takes a little bit for Tyler Adams is a little bit in and out of the team. You just mentioned Chris Richards in and out of the team. Weston McKennie's in and out, but in more than he's out. Like they play enough games. I think Tyler Adams, they're playing enough games that he's getting minutes. But I do worry about that. Then you have Pulisic out, right? This is going to be a long window that he's now been out for. We know that he's back in the team in Champions League for this midweek matchup. I think at Malmo, he was originally supposed to be at the weekend, but they've got a number of injuries. So maybe he gets more minutes along the way. Gio Reyna's going to miss this one. When we talk about depth, and not Acosta specifically, are you worried about the depth? Are you worried about the quality? Or do you think that we have enough depth or quality that A player or B player, first player or second player, we have enough to get results?
I think that we probably have...
There's Pulisic, by the way, hopped on the old charter flight, heading up to Sverige.
Yes, and I hope that he gets some minutes because I think it'll be valuable for him to get back on the field and do what he does best, which is running at players. I think what we've demonstrated over these last 2 tournaments in the summer is that we have some depth, and we've obviously seen some of our depth on display.
I will say, Jimmy, I don't think we're as deep as we thought, by the way. I think we've shown depth, but I think we're starting to see some separation of 40 players, right? Like,
that's normal, I would say. Yeah. I think a player that's been a positive is Brenden Aaronson, right? I think he now is pushing to be, at least in the conversation, to be a starter. And I think we can rely on him. Let me say it like this. With regard to depth, I think we can rely on Brenden Aaronson to start if Gio Reyna and Christian Pulisic aren't available. Whoever everybody's first choice starters are. And maybe Aaronson's one of them. Maybe he's not. But I think that I speak for almost everybody. I don't know too many Aaronson haters out there. But we could start him, and there might be a drop-off in some area, but I think he provides something else with energy and his commitment to pressure and all that in another. So there's I think more of a net positive when I look at what Aaronson brings to the table. Now, Ricardo Pepi, I think that he obviously started off banging hot, and when the games get a little bit tighter, if we're not being able to provide him service in the way that he needs to get the ball at times, I mean, we don't expect him to do everything for us all the time by himself. He's going to need to get that service from his teammates and have everybody kind of transition in a more meaningful way so we have more numerical advantages. I think he's still our number 1 guy, but Daryl Dike has been sharp, and he provides a different type of element, that maybe it's based on the matchup. This is really tough decisions. So I don't know if we've had so many tough decisions in so many different areas in the field, and I think that speaks to the positivity of our depth. But in terms of like those guys that maybe I think you're talking about the guys that have shown that they have this world-class ability and intangibles and leadership like Tyler Adams provides versus guys that have proven to be serviceable, right? Mm-hmm. Ones that can do the job, but are they going to win us games? And I think that's what you're getting into a little bit. And that's a good problem to have with regard to Acosta in particular, just to get specific. I do think that when Tyler Adams wasn't around during the Gold Cup, so there was no fear that he wasn't going to be in or out, right? Mm-hmm. He was the guy in that spot for the most part. And there was no Yunus Musa around either, right? So he wasn't necessarily competing for it. When those guys aren't around, and you've been in that too, when you've been in a camp, and not to say that you need to be the big dog to relax, But when you're the big dog in camp and you have the most caps, you're going to be the one that probably plays.
Yeah.
Now, when you get into the camp where everybody's got a gajillion caps and have a ton of experience and play for big clubs or whatever it may be, maybe you aren't walking around with the same type of confidence. And that's just human nature. So I think that there might be something tied into that Acosta as well. And then off the field, I think this stuff matters. I think Kellen Acosta is ready to leave MLS, and he's been wanting to make a move, and it's not happening probably fast enough. And you've been in that situation before. And when that stuff isn't happening, or you're not kind of getting your way, or whatever it may be, you get a little frustrated, and I think that shows in your game. And I don't know what else is happening behind the scenes, but I agree that he hasn't been as sharp as he had been during the Gold Cup.
Yeah, and I would say the same for Ricardo Pepi, right? He knows that he wants to leave. He's told the FC Dallas board or staff or front office that he wants a transfer. Obviously, there's nothing unpredictable about that whatsoever. Perhaps he's forcing his hand or forcing them to play a little bit more ball instead of playing hard ball, of like extending the price up higher. What I've been happy about with Ricardo Pepi, though, is his game hasn't changed yet. It's almost like his game has a simplicity to it that I don't see him becoming a different player. I see him just becoming a much better player of the version that he is. I don't see him being, you see a lot of guys that score a couple goals and now all of a sudden they got to turn with the ball every time they get it, or they got to do something dirty, or now they got to be the star. And I think he's a different type of player. Kellen Acosta, I think, is further up there in age, wants that move, kind of knows what it probably needs that move to secure himself a spot in this team in the World Cup and moving forward as a national team guy. Here's a comment from Derp Herp. Richards, Miles, Rob lets the whole team play a higher line. Thought it wasn't a coincidence the U.S. was winning so many second balls versus Costa Rica. MMA +2 mobile was swarming, center back swarming.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm reading that in real time, so I can't read what the rest of that comment says. Wonder if you guys agree.
I do think that playing a high line allows us to.
What's MMA +2 mobile? Was that just like a
two mobile center backs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So having two mobile center backs is really important because you can play a high line. It allows you to have some adaptability that you can really put the other team under some immense pressure when you know that any balls up over the top are usually handled. And if you have a goalkeeper also that's Manuel Neuer-esque that wants to do a little sweeper keeper, and I think it's well acknowledged that with regard to feet, Zach Steffen's got better feet than Matt Turner. So I think it just depends on the opponent. I think at times we can get caught. There was a bad pass in the Costa Rica game that went to Brian Ruiz, just to bring that up, that it had been gone to Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David. That probably would have been a straight one-on-one as opposed to Brian Ruiz.
Musa McKinney Adams. I don't know. MMA. I was like, what is MMA? I should know that. Musa McKinney Adams. He was trying to condense, which I appreciate. I just thought he was throwing I thought he was throwing up an illegal stream up on his comments trying to get us to jump to something. But yeah. Derp.
No. But that's my favorite. That's my favorite lineup or for the midfield for sure with two mobile center backs. I feel like, yes, it allows us to high press, but also it gives us that flexibility that we can do multiple things, that we can high press if we want. We can also sit back and absorb, and we can maybe press out in the wings. We can just decide where we want to pick up the ball and where we want to try to win it based on the situation and who we're playing against ultimately. Because my fear against Mexico, not that we have to sit back too much, and I think we have enough experience now after beating them in the Nations League final and the Gold Cup final of kind of where that sweet spot is, when to press Mexico and when to hold off. Because if you press too high, they're so good at playing through it. That's where we could get stung. And now with Raul Jimenez scoring goals for Wolves, which he did today, and scoring for Mexico again and starting to find that scoring touch, that's just going to be, we're going to need two mobile center backs, I think, to deal with Raul Jimenez, especially if Chuka Lozano's running off his shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a great game for us and a good test. The thing for me for Gregg Berhalter is he going to find that right lineup that's going to really unlock Mexico? And we always seem to have their number from a set piece perspective, and long may that continue. But it just seems like, is that a winning formula for us? Just to kind of rely on set pieces to help us beat Mexico. I mean, it's a nice thing to have, but at times we're going to have to beat them just in open play.
Yeah. So Jimmy, let's move on to your roster wish list. And if you guys think that MMA is the best midfield lineup for this upcoming camp, let us know in the comments, and we'll have Des, our wonderful producer, throw those up on the screen, or give us a thumbs up if you disagree, because you can just hit those over and over again. Jimmy, in terms of a roster wish list, I'm assuming there's no real extensions beyond your Joe Scally. I mean, is Daryl DK on your roster wish list this one? Is Jordan Peafock coming back in? I mean, if you have a Christian Pulisic at 80-90% and he's played 10-15 minutes, I know you're going to bring him in, but is he in your lineup if he's considered fit and healthy without minutes behind him in a big game like that against Mexico, or do you save him for Jamaica? Give me your roster wish list for this one. It doesn't have to be all the players, but just give me some core players or ones that people that are watching this might be surprised or engage in the conversation. That's just not going to be our same 11 as always. And maybe it is the same 11, but in terms of the team you're going to put together for this call up.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go through it. Matt Turner, Zach Steffen, for sure. The 2 goalkeepers. Everybody can give me a thumbs up in the chat for that. I would say on the left side, right, Anthony Robinson would be one of the left backs. I'd like to see Joe Scally come in for George Bello. So I know that Scally can play right or left. I
also think, by the way, on the George Bello, I think it's a great time to try something else. George Bello's young. I don't think he's there yet. I think he's showed glimpses in the summer. I think we saw his ceiling a little bit for now and things he needs to work on and improve on at the international level. You can't be great every game. And now it's the perfect time, by the way, to make that change and create some healthy competition that's not necessarily in camp, that you can have it be based on form in their club team and then perhaps how they respond at the national team level. Sorry, keep going.
No, you're fine. I like that insight for sure. I'd say John Brooks and Chris Richards, Miles Robinson. I'm open. Anybody want to chime in with that last center back? You could have McKenzie. You could have Miazga. You could have Tim Ream. We have some options there. Walker Zimmerman. On the right side, I think it's Dest and Yedlin. And then the midfield, Musa McKennie Adams. I think Acosta comes in. Aaronson.
By the way, you see Joe Scally for now as a left back?
I do. Well, I see him in terms of a depth chart if I'm creating a depth chart, but you could put Scally on the right side as well. But I kind of like Dest as a winger. I kind of want to see what that looks like. I don't think that Greg has the courage.
I think that's a great shout, especially if you're going to talk about, I don't know, Yedlin could be okay, or Joe Scally, if he proves himself at some point, just go, okay, at least we got something there. We'll see how that goes for the next couple of games. By the way, we had a comment there that says MMA is the one thing that everybody agrees on, which I also agree with. And it's one of the most exciting things I've seen in the history of the national team is that group together and the rhythm they have, just styles of play kind of being cohesive, knowing that they play in different leagues and different system. So anyways,
no. So MMA for sure. So for everybody that doesn't know, that's McKinney, Issa, and wow, I'm losing Tyler Adams. Sorry. Yeah. Yunus Musa, Tyler Adams, and Weston McKinney. Other midfield spots, I like De La Torre. I think him and Busio kind of do the same things. Not like for like, but and Busio's on a good run of form with Venezia. I'd bring him in for sure. There's probably some other room. I think Leget's probably going to get called in for experience. Even if, for me, what I like about Leget, even if he doesn't play, I still feel like he's got good leadership qualities. Like he's a good guy off the field. He's still coaching. He's like an extension of the coaching staff that he'll still give you good advice. He'll still put his arm around some of the younger players and say, hey, maybe think about it this way or whatever it may be. And just, or hey, I've been through that before and it's going to be okay, whatever. I feel like we still need a little bit of that in the team. And I know Leget will get called in for sure, but I don't know if we necessarily need to start him. And I'm okay with that because I still think he provides some value off of the field.
Yeah. But if you're Leget, you're like, I need to be on that plane, right? I need to be on that plane
for sure
to Doha. And there is a number of things that he can provide this team that might not be on the field or playing in those games that I think will be really useful as a leader, as a more experienced guy, as just an all around, just positive impact and energy. And I think he probably sees that writing. And that's what it's going to come down to, is him or somebody else as the maybe like-minded or a wash in terms of capabilities or abilities on the field. That can he bring those other intangibles that make the team better even when he's not playing?
No, that's a good point. I would say Timothy Weah. He scored against Costa Rica. I thought once he finds his rhythm and gets a little space to run at teams, he's very, very good.
And Jamaica's Jamaica's a perfect game for him to play in it also.
I agree. So him, Brendan Aaronson, Christian Pulisic. I hope that Thomas Tuchel does us a service by playing him maybe 30 minutes against Malmo and then 60 minutes against Burnley. So he'll be ready for 90 or at least 60 or 75.
Yeah, Malmo's giving up a lot of goals. Let him play, man. Let him play, man. I know he gets his confidence with the national team, but let's do it reverse. Get your confidence in Champions League. Come play with the national team. Come on, Tuchel. 30 against Malmo and then 60 against Burnley and then let him get a 75 to 90 against Mexico. Tuchel, let's do us a solid over here, pal. Yeah.
So I would look at those players. Pepi up top. I would have Daryl DK come. He scored in 3 straight games. I was just looking at his stats. It's pretty ridiculous. He's scored 6 goals in his last 8 games. He has been on fire. The 21-year-old is really lighting it up, and he's a hot hand. And I think he's one that can come off the bench. I mean, imagine trying to mark Daryl DK or Ricardo Pepi, either one of them. If you want to start either one, but just 60 minutes in, you're a center back and you're like, oh my God, I got it. Now this guy comes on with fresh legs. You know, it's not a nice treat, but I think DK over Jussi Zardes would be my choice in this one. Despite me thinking that Jussi Zardes has a legit type role to play within the team, I go with Daryl DK at this point. P-Folk, probably not, which has got to be gutting for him and a lot of the other players. Sargent might be another one. I mean, Sargent has the best ticket to the Premier League I've ever seen. He's watching so many great teams play around the team he plays on. Unbelievable. So maybe there's something to learn from that.
Hey, real quick, Jimmy, real quick. Sean had a comment saying MMA midfield is the best for this window. But he thinks that, or she thinks that the team will be better in open play if Reina plays as an 8 or 10 rather than as a winger. My comment on that real quick before we continue on your wish list is I don't think the team has played with Pepi yet, and we haven't had an option where when you give Pepi the ball, he will get it back to you. He just looks to get you back involved. If you go all back to the Honduras goals. Ball to his feet, lay it off, get it to Pulisic, who's now facing the field. We open up, we go to the other side, they're imbalanced, we bam, goal. And I think that brings a different type of challenge than Gio Reyna trying to find a way to play with Josh Sargent, trying to find a rhythm between all of them. Gio Reyna in that sort of withdrawn winger. I know Greg likes his wingers out wide. There is an argument to put him in the 10 spot potentially. Brendan Aaronson also plays at that 10 spot at times for Salzburg. So there's something to that. But I also want to judge Pulisic and I want to judge Reyna based on their ability to combine with Ricardo Pepi, because he is a different type of player and he plays very simple, bringing those players into the game in most places around the field. Unless he's in front of goal, then he's putting his head down and trying to bang one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm curious, though, about Sergiño Dest as an out-and-out winger, because he would stay wide, whereas there are times, and we've seen it maybe a little bit about against Jamaica at home in Austin, where we had our wingers kind of play inverted, like the double 10 spot, and then Aaronson would try to run from inside out to create that space and to drag people in and out of spaces to make that happen. We have options, though, which I actually think is a positive for our depth. But yes, for me,
the differentiator of all those options, by the way, is pressing. Who's going to press and who's going to transition. And Gio Reyna doesn't transition well. And he can press well. If he knows that there's players in and around him when those turnovers happen, he can be that first initiation of pressure. But he looks around to, you have to have the whole team on the same page in those moments. And Brendan Aaronson does that great. It makes the game very, very predictable when teams are vulnerable. They've worked hard to win the ball back, and now they're like, oh, what do we do with it? And you got Brendan Aaronson chasing you down. I think those are things that you have to take into account as well, and ways that this U.S. men's national team are capable of scoring goals and not having to build up or build through our MMA. Sometimes you just win the ball in high positions with a good press. So.
Yeah, Gio Reyna is interesting because he's still got that hamstring injury. I'm curious to see if he'll be available for this or if Greg calls him in just so he doesn't get a little bit more distance from the group, even though obviously it seems like the bonds with the core players is very, very strong.
Yeah.
But that would be one to keep an eye on because it's looking like he's getting closer to training again. But we're not going to probably rely on him, especially against Mexico. It really comes down to, I think, in some ways, who you start, how you want to press and where you want to press and where you try to want to win the ball back and where you want to play into the ego of Mexico a little bit. And we can get into that in our preview show. But that's kind of my wish list. I'd like to see DK, Scally come in. And those would probably be my two that really jump out at me. And then Busio, I think, deserves to get called in again. But outside of that, I think it's going to look pretty standard to what it did before.
Yeah, so those of you that are just tuning in, obviously Ramiro just tuned in and said the biggest story heading into the next qualifiers is my mustache. So I appreciate that. Huge development. It's actually not. It takes me like 3 days to develop this thing. So it's a pretty minor. Oh, look, we got another YouTube user. Heath Stash should start at center back. But if you guys are just tuning in or you've been watching all along, let us know who you think are the surprise additions or the players that you want on your men's national team roster wish list coming into this. Obviously, Jimmy going with Busio, going with Daryl DK, and what was your third one?
Joe Scally.
Joe Scally. How could I forget him? The only one that we're upset wasn't in the last. Actually, Daryl DK should have been in the last one as well.
I thought so too.
But Jimmy, on that point, before we move on to our CONCACAF player power rankings, and we're going to do a top 10, and we want everybody's thoughts on this too. You can give us your top one, your 10. You can give us your whole 10 in the comments if that's what you feel like. And you could send them one at a time so that Des has to sift through each and every one of those. Do you think he brings in less players this camp? Do you think it's a 24-player camp? Is it a 23? Are you narrowing it down to what a World Cup roster? For those that don't know, it's 23 players that go. That's usually 3 goalkeepers that get brought in, and then you've got the rest as field players. Or do you think you go with 26 because you can. And I don't know what the mandates are or how they landed on 26 or 27 last time around, but do you think you start to narrow it down from here?
I think you do. I think this is a good opportunity to look at that because, as we discussed before, when you have 3 games in 7 or 8 days, you do have to rotate the squad. It just makes sense to do that, and then you have to take some risks. Now, some managers were doing those risks different than others, like Mexico in the last World Cup qualifying international window. Their first 2 games, they rolled out their studs, and then the last game, they decided against El Salvador away to mix the team. And they still got results. That's just a credit to Mexico for making that happen. Whereas we struggled when we mixed our team, and Gregg decided to mix up the team in the middle. So we have 2 teams that were pretty similar in the home games, and the away game he tried to change it up. And it's hard. It's hard to maintain that rhythm and flow and establishing that rapport that's you could only do in games of that magnitude, in those experiences, to know how players are going to move in different situations. And so to not have that consistency, I think, hurt us a bit. And I wonder how that looks moving forward, because I don't think you rotate the squad as much. I think you have 7 or 8 guys that you know are going to be a part of both games, and maybe you tinker with 1 or 2 positions or starting positions. Like maybe Dest does go play a little bit higher against Jamaica away from home, but plays as the right back against Mexico. Even though I thought Mexico, when I look back at the Nations League final, when we had Pulisic and Dest on the left side, I thought Mexico stacked us up very, very well. And I thought both of those players in the run of play were pretty tame. Probably the nicest way to say it. I mean, Pulisic did score an epic penalty and had the greatest celebration in U.S. men's national team history. But and what a photo that is. But ultimately, I thought he had a pretty quiet game where he had to drop really deep to get it, and then he just get hacked down by somebody because they don't want to ever allow him to turn and run.
Yeah, that's just an unfortunate side of his style of play, right? And I think that experiment for Dest and Pulisic together just hasn't worked out in the way that I would like it to. I think they both put their foot on the ball too much, and it's hard to find a rhythm with each other. If they ever did, it'd be unbelievable. But obviously, teams are prepping for that. You just kick them down and whatever. How many guys do you at home think should be called in for this next camp? And does it matter to you? Should it be 27 every single time? Jimmy, do you think and I want everybody that's watching this to give their number, but do you think too many? There can be too many in terms of cohesion and team balance. And, you're talking about meal rooms and meetings and video sessions and training sessions and being able to have functional training sessions, the few that you have. And, 27 can be a lot, right? And
it is a lot.
And, where everything, I think they take 2 buses everywhere and things like that. It's a lot of guys. But, do you think that's too many? Do you think that's – because I always think that get as many in as you can to experience that, especially the young guys, like you said, sitting on the sideline, seeing how players operate. Joe Scally coming in and seeing, like you said, his Eddie Pope doing those things in a locker room, sitting in the locker room, getting off the bus for a big game when you realize, oh my gosh, I'm really far from home. And obviously there's not going to be any away fans in Jamaica, but just for the Mexico game, it doesn't matter what they do. That's still going to be I would guess at least a 50-50 crowd to Mexico, if not more. They always find a way, no matter where you put it, to put a large contingency of Mexican fans, but to experience that can be life-changing. So it would be a shame for these games to cut the number down, but I could also see how you need to start to have a little more cohesion in your team.
Well, I'd also add that we're getting to the point in qualifying where we can't worry about people's feelings. We can't worry about whether they're good enough or whatever. And Gregg just needs to decide on what his number is going to be to get to what you're talking about, a little bit more of that cohesion. Now, I do think it's incredibly important for Joe Scally, if you see him as a future prospect, which we all do. And if Gregg doesn't, I honestly think it's personal at this point, then he would be a good one to get that experience and sit on the sideline and absorb or be around in the locker room, even if you didn't want to start him. Daryl Dike, getting him reassimilated to the team because he wasn't part of the first 2 qualifying windows and got hurt during the Gold Cup, getting him back into the fold in a meaningful way, making him feel good about being part of the team again. I'm sure a lot of these guys, aren't feeling great or not feeling the love maybe in the same way. And, everybody's getting on the Ricardo Pepi hype train. And why wouldn't you? The kid's been playing very, very well. But, at some point we're going to have to lean on other guys. For instance, I was part of 2 World Cup qualifying cycles where Steve Ralston scored the match winner against Mexico to send us to the 2006 World Cup, didn't make the final team. And I was in Honduras when Connor Casey scored a brace to get us into the 2010 World Cup. He didn't make the final team either. You're going to need to lean on some guys that probably won't make your final team, but you should be also leaning on guys that are in good form. And Daryl Dike and Joe Scally are 2 of the hottest players we have in our player pool. And if they didn't get brought in for this, even if it's Mexico and Jamaica, it would be a bit of a shame. I mean, what else can they do? If they can't play as well as they possibly can and kick ass and take names and still can't get called into the national team, then honestly, it feels personal at that point. And I would be pretty upset. If I was a player doing everything I could and I had the stats and the results to back it up, and that wasn't good enough, I would be pretty upset at my national team manager for not giving me a shot, especially when he's given me a shot before. So that's speaking about DK. With regard to Scally, obviously he's got he hasn't had that experience yet.
The other thing, and we had a comment from Ryan there that was talking about what does it do to a player's confidence if you do get called in and you don't get a game? I mean, every player that doesn't play games, I remember not making a roster. I remember being called in and not dressing, or I remember going to Costa Rica for one. I remember others where perhaps you weren't in the 18, and some of these games it was just 18. So if you were in the 23 or 24, there was other ways that you felt part of it, right? There was like a split of the bonuses, the way that the player contract works. It was 18 players would get the bonuses, but the players would decide together that, hey, we're just going to actually divvy this up from everybody into camp. And there was other ways that you felt validated and a part of the team, but it certainly hurts, right? And it makes you think about what you can do. And obviously it's hard in camp because you don't have a ton of training sessions where you can prove yourself to the people there, right? They're watching you, and even more so than ever, they're watching all your games, all your minutes. They're in contact with your coach. They're in contact with you. The communication is constant, but it certainly hurts your confidence when you go into a camp and you don't get minutes, or you don't get brought on, or, you're kind of playing a bit part role. It's hard. You want to feel part of it. When you go into the locker room, everybody's celebrating after a win or everybody's mad after a loss. You don't know how to react or feel, And so I do think it's important. Jimmy, I want your take too, because I know you've experienced this. What was it like for you? Because it hit me at times where I was like, man, I don't like mixed emotions. Am I supposed to feel like this? This is a team thing. I should be honored to be here, but at the same time, I want to be playing. I know I'm good enough to play, and all those things go through your head when you're a young player or not a young player that are trying to get national team minutes, because it's not like a contract with your club team where it's like you're going to see that contract out. You might not ever get called back in again in your life, and that's just the reality for a number of reasons. But what was it like for you?
I would say that the best experience I can lean on, and this might be a flex, but when I got named to the World Cup team in 2006, hold
on. That's a definite flex. Just so you know. We'll say this might be a flex, but that's a definite flex. I mean, you're flexing. Like I can see you're bursting through your sweatshirt.
Flex, right now. Yes. I just a little roid rage here, but definitely with the flex. I would say that it was the most amazing experience to get named to the team. And then for the next couple of weeks, you don't want to get hurt in your club because you want to make sure you're in camp. But you go to that pre-World Cup camp, and it's the hardest thing ever. And you're running your ass off, and you're trying to do everything you can to obviously prove that you deserve to be there. That's one. And second, you start to, after about 2 weeks, you realize, yeah, you know what? Like the shine of being a part of the World Cup team is worn off a little bit. As crazy as that sounds, it's worn off just a smidge because you're just in the trenches. It sucks. It's really hard. You're obviously going up against some of the best players we've ever produced, and they're trying their asses off as well. Not that like they weren't before, but this is the real deal. We're not joking around anymore. And you get to that spot where like, yeah, this is cool, but it'd be cooler getting to actually play in a game. And that's the best example I had. And to go through that process and not play doesn't feel the same. You don't have the same experience. The shared experience isn't the same. Yeah, you're thrilled for the guys when they win, and obviously disappointed when they lose, but it's kind of weird when they lose. That's probably when you're going to get your opportunity, right? Or if somebody gets hurt, that's like I had Corey Gibbs get called in over me, and he got hurt in a warm-up game against Morocco. And that's the only reason Bruce started to look at me as a potential starter, the first defender off the bench in that World Cup, because Corey Gibbs got hurt. And it sucks because now Corey Gibbs, I mean, you go and you see him, he has a significant knee injury, and you realize in that moment, even though it's your opportunity that you're probably going to have a better chance to play, his dream is over. And now we're working through this as a friend. Like, I am absolutely gutted for you. That is the most heartbreaking thing. But then in the back of your mind as a competitor, you're like, but now I got a better chance. And it's a really, really weird spot. And so I'm giving you kind of a couple different examples, but I think they're swimming in the same waters of this feeling conflicted when bad things happen to a team or an individual that gives you a better opportunity to play.
Yeah, I think people that and to Ryan's question, it's just like anything competitive in life that you do, right? You have this mixed emotion of like that killer instinct that is what got you to that point to be in this type of competition or to have this edge. But at the same time, you have the human side of it that's like, oh, for me to be there, somebody else has to not, or for me to make this team, even if it's youth tryout, somebody else has to not make that team. That's the whole point of the tryout situation. And so it doesn't change at the highest levels. It just gets a little bit trickier. So Jimmy, let's move on to CONCACAF power rankings. I want your top 10. I don't know if you want to start from 10 to go to 1. Or
let's go 1 down. That feels easier.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's going to get a little muddled as we get to a little bit, because for me, the outright number one, and I don't know how anybody can disagree, it's Alphonso Davies. I think he's the number one player, full stop.
And he's by far the best player. And not just the power ranking. He's just the best player in CONCACAF. Even if he was injured right now, I would still put him on this
exactly.
10. I'm not putting Christian Pulisic on this. And I think Christian Pulisic is a phenomenal borderline world-class player when he's fit and healthy. But Alphonso Davies and what he's done with the national team and what he's done at Bayern Munich and the growth trajectory that he's had and then the consistency of that game, by far the number one. So yeah, I fully agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I figured we have to have a manager for this team, so I'm going to go there because I feel pretty good about this choice. That could be up for debate, of course, like any of these spots, but Alphonso Davies seems like an absolute lock. Thomas Christensen, the manager for Panama, I thought maybe the second qualifying window wasn't as good, but that first window, I thought he was tremendous. I think he's getting the most out of his team, and I think that Thomas Christensen would be probably the manager so far of making the most out of
John Hertzman, Jimmy. John Hertzman, come on.
I agree.
My guy, dude. He's been playing everything like a World Cup final, and now he's actually got him believing it.
I know. Hertzman's there. He's right there in the mix, 100%. But
we'll split hairs on that one. We'll split hairs on that one.
Okay. But I think that Christensen is a good shout, and I like his vibe. And if Panama get into the World Cup, he's going to be a big reason why. Obviously,
and that is a huge challenge, by the way, to come on into that type of world and culture and style of play and build a team and all of those things. So I do have to give him credit, because that is a complete kind of fish out of water experience. And I respect anybody that goes that far to continue their manager. It's because it's the same as a player, right? And it's easy to get locked into your little bubble and world and jobs that you have. That I think that's a great shout. By the way, in the comment section, does everybody agree? And if they don't, Jimmy and I will give us the time and place with Alphonso Davies' argument, and Jimmy and I will show up. We'll put on those old sock and boppers that are like the blown up boxing gloves, and we'll box it out with you guys, because that should be the only one we don't argue over. The rest that we can argue over. But tell us your number 2 through 10, including your 1, if you actually think that there's a power rankings. And I'm talking about current. I'm not talking about historic, or if your player is injured right now. If you're number 1, then maybe they're not at number 1. But yeah, tell us what you. Oh, we got Pulisic number 1 here. Oh wow, we just went straight U.S. men's national team.
Chris Skinner, I appreciate that.
For the power rankings. This is the kind of fan I like, to be honest with you.
Yeah, let's not mess about. They're just going to pick all of our favorite players in the U.S. men's national team. I respect that, Chris
Our
Skinner.
Starting 11. It's not even starting 11.
What I'll say for number 2, and again, I feel like 2 through 10 is really up for interpretation. It's also,
by the way, he didn't have a goalie, which is kind of sad for us, because you can only have 10. So he just cropped out our goalie from our starting 11 on that list, but that's okay.
When I look at Mexico, it's tough because I think if everybody was healthy and ready to go, I think that you're going to say Raul Jimenez has got to be in that conversation. That's the thing. If Pulisic, but if it's the timing of, I guess I need some more clarity as to like when the window of time is. I assume current right now. Jimenez has got to be, he's going to be in the top 5 for sure. Chucky Lozano will be in there. I think when Pulisic is healthy, we just don't know if he is. I don't think he's probably there at the moment because he just hasn't really.
Well, let's talk about just form. Yeah, okay. Let's make it not the power. Let's make it form. Let's make it current form, right? I think Jimenez, that goal that he scored today was a phenomenal goal, and just shows again the danger that he has compared to the other options with Henry Martin and some of the other options for Mexico. But Chucky Lozano on one of the best runs of Napoli's ever had in the league. In great form. Would you have him in your top 5? Or
Chucky Lozano would be in there. Obviously he's coming off of his own injury, so he's trying to round into form, as it were. Tyler Adams, I mean, if we take out club form, because he's been in and out of RB Leipzig's starting lineup, I think he's been very influential, and we could argue one of our most important players for our team. And I think, even though
Jonathan David? Jonathan David, is he?
Jonathan David's in there. I think you got to have a conversation with Keylor Navas. Like, Costa Rica's not the same if he's not between the sticks. I agree.
He's getting mixed results right now at PSG.
That's fine.
Donnaruma's going to bump him soon.
I get it. But Keylor Navas, if he was in goal for the second half against us, I don't think that Timothy Weah scores that goal. I think that Keylor Navas makes that save. I would say Mema Ochoa is someone you have to throw in there as well, just based on his experience, that you have a goalkeeper that can make those timely saves and bring what he does.
Didn't he just lose the CONCACAF Champions League final?
I get it. Yeah, but did you see the defender in front of him that like completely whiffed the ball? I mean, come on, dude. That's not on him. I will say that
We got Des saying Mikel Antonio. Now we're
Mikel Antonio for what? Not showing up? Like what? Like the team plays better when he's I don't know. It's tough. I mean, there's obviously shouts that I want to give to El Salvador because they have players that are playing kind of over their heads, and
Alex
you have
Roldan's
some players
been fantastic. Yeah,
you have some players that are underperforming as well. You know, I guess I want to throw this to you, Heath, and everybody in the chat. Like, who do you think's been our best attacking player? I guess Ricardo Pepi would have to be in the conversation. Our best half so far, and I think we've actually hit our peak, was that second half against Honduras and San Pedro Sula. Like, we were sick in that second half. Everything was working. So I don't know, is Brendan Aaronson coming to the equation for people as a top 10 currently right now in CONCACAF? Yeah. I don't know. A
lot of people are giving shouts for Edson Alvarez as well.
Edson Alvarez, fantastic, to sign a new deal with Ajax, you know, because I think they can see his value as well. Edson Alvarez is a tremendous choice. I would concur with that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's tough, right? Because again, maybe when we do an update on these power rankings, we'll build some more parameters around that are based on certain things, current form, and maybe some other parameters that create like 2 per team at a max, so that we're forced to go a little bit deeper, because there are some players that are hard to overlook, but perhaps their teams aren't getting great results. We're not following them on the day-to-day in the way that we would any of these players that are playing for Champions League clubs that are maybe playing in Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, and so on. But is there Tajon Buchanan? That was a good argument too. He's about to make his move over to, is it Royal Antwerp? Is that where he's going as well? Or is it, no, it's Brugge.
Club Brugge. Yeah,
Brugge. Yeah. That'll be a good move for him too. But yeah, it's a lot of young, I think good players right now in CONCACAF.
I think what's hard is we're trying to pick a CONCACAF power ranking top 10 list, and you try to bring the club form in, or you just really kind of how the first 2 qualifying windows went. You know, I think that's where I'm getting a little bit. Yeah,
producer Des threw in Mikel Antonio, and it's funny when I was
which is great for West Ham.
Yeah, when I was doing some research on just sort of all the CONCACAF players, see who's really been in form, if I've been sleeping on anybody, and most of the power rankings were built around the power rankings of CONCACAF players that play for their national team, just because you have so many dual nationals, and like, you know, you start getting into wider categories of players that were born in CONCACAF or from CONCACAF that play for other national teams or don't play for national teams. Mikel Antonio as an example of one that's unbelievable at the club level, and having a historic last couple of years at West Ham. But yeah, I think maybe we'll dial that in. But is there any players who would be your surprise power rankings that would go in there that wouldn't be, you know, I mean, Ricardo Pepi is at the moment would be a surprise if you had it built on a wider window, but in a short window of those 2 camps, you go, okay, of course he's in that, right? Because he's the sure starter, number 9 for our national team right now.
Yeah, I think Pepi would be in there. Aaronson, I think, deserves at least a mention. Edson Alvarez, I think, is a great shout for if we try to go like team by team. I think that would be one to look at. Kyle Aaron obviously scored against us at home in that our first World Cup qualifier at home. You have some like unsung heroes, I think, with every team that probably play in those thankless positions that do.
We talked about Matt Turner for a while being sort of this, I mean, maybe not based on pure heroics alone, but had a long run with the national team from summer till Zach Steffen started, where he made a bunch of saves and didn't give up goals, and the team was continuing to get results. I mean, there's got to be some argument for him to be in there as well.
Yeah, I think there is from a U.S. perspective. You know, Miles Robinson, I think, has been really solid and continues to grow with each game. We could argue Walker Zimmerman was very good in his moments with the team as well. Does that warrant consideration in the power rankings overall, top 10? Probably not. But I mean, I think there are a lot of unsung heroes. You know, when I look at El Salvador in particular, you mentioned Alex Roldan. I mean, there's some players that have really kind of stepped up, and Rivas in particular, Darwin Serene. I'm looking at their team right now. Enriquez, who ended up scoring against Costa Rica. You know, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of players that I think deserve some mention, and we're going to find out to see if they can be relied upon moving forward. But I think from a U.S.
Barcenas, I like Barcenas also. He was another one that I thought has been really good in qualifying for Panama.
Yes.
Just stirring things up, just a really quality player on the ball, quick, explosive, just another one. So yeah, maybe we'll actually, I would love for people in the comments to give us a little bit of parameters for the next time. Maybe next Monday we'll give a little update with a different type of game we'll play for the power rankings.
Yeah, let's do it.
Allow us to go a layer deeper into CONCACAF, and maybe you got to pull from every single team of players that are recently or have been called up in these last windows, because it prevents, you know, a little bit of this club team bias as well. But I think overall, it just shows you again the quality and depth of all the teams that are at the top right now all have arguments for 3 or 4 players to be in the top 10 in power rankings. Mexico, Canada, US, obviously. And then you go beyond that and you start to look at some of these teams that have had spectacular players, but perhaps don't have the support staff around them, or aren't playing at a club that we deem valuable enough to take into consideration, and perhaps we should.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. Barcenas in particular, I really like that shout. I think he's been very good stirring the pot, as you mentioned. I mean, Estuquiao, who plays for Canada, takes all the set pieces. They're number 7.
Mm-hmm.
I like his game a lot. I think he helps them transition and getting Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David the ball in good spots, which obviously we know is important. If you're having your best players have to drop too deep, then it's going to be really hard to really create meaningful attacks on a consistent basis.
He's been a good dual national recruit for them, and just a good utility player, which you need, that can step up right away to that level. And it's not like an integration into the team. He obviously had the Gold Cup, but great shot there as well.
Yeah. I mean, you got a couple players on Canada that probably deserve some love. I mean, that back line is working real hard to play the way that John Hertzman, their manager, wants them to play. When I look at Vittoria and Miller and Johnston and Laria, doing the business going up and down the wings. You got Tejan Buchanan on the other side. There's just a nice balance there. So maybe Hertzman should be the manager, to go back to that before. But I really want to
have him. Can't have him. He's on my power rankings.
That's true.
Yeah. So Jimmy, I think that's it for us today. Is there any closing thoughts that you have leading into this? Obviously, we're going to expect to have roster announcements this week. You and I will do, I think that'll
roster
be
recap, baby. Let's go.
Roster recap, talking about all the things that we've talked about today, just a little more heated or passionate, excited, whichever way you want to spin our general enthusiasm towards the national team. But do you have any other thoughts that are top of your mind before we close this out?
Yeah, my only thought is to really finish my opening thought, that I think that Joe Scally needs to be in this team. And if he's not, I have Gregg Berhalter's phone number, and I'm not afraid to use it. I'm going to text him, everybody. You can count on it if Joe Scally is not in the team. Come on, Greg, do the right thing.
I love that. And before we check out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Jimmy and I are going to be going live on this YouTube channel and as well as the Qué Golazo podcast throughout the CONCACAF qualifying window, as well as other episodes throughout Europe when we're talking Champions League. Obviously, this is hosted by Luis Miguel Echegaray in most cases, but around CONCACAF, Jimmy and I take over and take you guys on the journey of that. We appreciate you guys so much. Keep those comments coming in. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.